Have you ever wondered how a hotel walkway, packed with people at a Friday night dance, could suddenly give way and kill 114 of them? Or how a dam could survive a catastrophe completely intact and still wipe an entire town off the map in a matter of minutes? In today's video, I'll tell you how those 114 people died on two suspended walkways in a Kansas City hotel in 1981, and how a dam in the Italian Alps held firm while nearly 2,000 people vanished in the valley below it. I'll tell you how a brand new bridge in Washington state, open for barely 4 months, tore itself apart in a 42-mile-an-hour wind and killed nothing but a single dog trapped in a car. I'll tell you how the self-taught engineer who built Los Angeles its water was warned about a leak just hours before his dam gave way and killed hundreds. How 2.3 million gallons of molasses once swept through the streets of Boston at 35 miles an hour, and how the longest cantilever bridge in the world collapsed not once, but twice before it was ever finished, at a cost of 89 lives. 6 disasters, 4 countries more than 7 decades apart, and in every single one of them someone saw the danger coming, said so out loud, and was overruled. So why does the same thing keep happening, and why does almost no one ever answer for it? The dam is still standing. Right now, tonight, the Vajont Dam holds back the mountain in northern Italy exactly the way its engineers promised it would. It never cracked. It never buckled. It survived the worst night of its life almost completely intact. And on October 9th, 1963, it killed close to 2,000 people. Understand what happened there, because it rewrites everything you think you know about how these disasters work. The water didn't break the dam. A chunk of the mountain above the reservoir, around 260 million cubic meters of rock, sheared off Montauk and dropped into the lake at once. The reservoir had nowhere to go, so it went up and over. A wall of water crested the top of one of the tallest dams on earth and fell into the valley below. The town of Longarone was directly in the path. In minutes, most of it was gone. The concrete structure the engineers built, barely scratched. The people the engineers were supposed to protect, erased. That gap, the structure survives, the people don't, is the story of engineering failure across the last century. And when you line these disasters up by date and read what the people in charge actually knew, a pattern shows up that nobody in a press conference ever wants to say out loud. These weren't accidents that came from nowhere. In case after case, someone saw it coming, said so, wrote it down, and got overruled. Then afterward, the institutions responsible reached for the same 3 words. Act of God, rewind to the beginning of the century. August 29th, 1907, Quebec, Canada. Engineers are building the longest cantilever bridge in the world across the St. Lawrence River, a single span reaching 1,800 feet. The consulting engineer, an American named Theodore Cooper, had picked the cantilever design himself. He called it the best and cheapest plan. Sit with that word, cheapest. Weeks before the collapse, the steel in the lower compression cords started showing distress, bending where bending should not happen. Cooper's own man on the site flagged it. Cooper admitted he got, in his word, uneasy, and then the bridge came down during construction with the workers still on it. 75 men died. 33 of them were Mohawk ironworkers from a single community, gone in one afternoon. The investigation found the cause was the design of the steel itself. The latticing on those compression cords was wrong. 9 years later, in 1916, they were raising the center span of the replacement bridge when it fell into the river too and killed 13 more. By the time the thing finally opened, the project had cost 89 lives. 12 years after that first collapse, the failure moved from steel to something almost absurd. January 15th, 1919, Boston's North End. A storage tank owned by United States Industrial Alcohol held 2.3 million gallons of molasses, roughly 13,000 tons of it. That tank had been rushed up in 1915 and it leaked from the day it was filled. Neighbors watched molasses drip through the seams and pool on the street. At least one employee told his bosses the thing was structurally unsound. The company's response was to recalk it. On an unseasonably warm afternoon, the tank let go, and a wave of molasses moved through the streets at about 35 miles per hour, faster than anyone could run. 21 people were killed. Around 150 were injured. The company had an explanation ready, and it wasn't the leaks, it was sabotage. Anarchists, they said. Someone set off a bomb. Translation, anything but our tank. It took a court-appointed investigator almost 5 years, 3,000 witnesses, and 45,000 pages of testimony to reject that outright and rule what the people on Commercial Street already knew. The tank was too thin. It was built too cheap. United States Industrial Alcohol paid out. Settlement figures run from $628,000 up toward $1 million. 9 years later, the same denial reached a much larger scale. March 12, 1928. The St. Francis Dam, north of Los Angeles, built under one man, William Mulholland, the self-taught engineer who had made Los Angeles possible by bringing it water. The reservoir had filled to capacity for the first time on March 7. On the morning of the 12th, the dam keeper, a man named Tony Harnischweger, spotted a muddy leak and was worried enough to call Mulholland out to look at it. Mulholland inspected it and pronounced the dam safe. Translation, go back to bed. Around midnight the dam failed. Harnischweger, who had raised the alarm, was among the first to die, along with his family in the cottage below the wall. The flood ran more than 50 miles to the sea. The official death toll that August was 385, but bodies kept surfacing for decades, in the 1970s, in the 90s, and the count today is put at least 431, with some estimates far higher. At the inquest, Mulholland said 4 words that ended his career. I envy the dead. The jury didn't recommend prosecution, but they left a line on the record that should be carved somewhere permanent. The construction of a municipal dam, they wrote, should never be left to the sole judgment of one man, no matter how eminent. Now to the one everybody has seen and almost nobody understands. July 1st, 1940, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge opens in Washington state. Before it even opened, the construction crews had a nickname for it, because the deck bounced and rolled in the wind while they were still building it. They called it Galloping Gertie. They knew something was wrong. The engineer running wind tests, a University of Washington professor named Frederick Farquharson, had watched a scale model twist in a certain way and said flatly that if that motion ever happened on the real bridge, it would be the end of the bridge. 4 months and 7 days after it opened, in a wind of about 42 miles per hour, it happened on the real bridge. The span tore itself apart and dropped into Puget Sound. And here is the part that makes Tacoma different. Not one person died. The only casualty was a Cocker Spaniel named Tubby, trapped in an abandoned car. What died at Tacoma was an idea. This was the cheaper, sleeker, more flexible design, chosen over a heavier truss version that would have cost around $11 million instead of $8. Engineers still argue about the exact physics. The tidy version in physics textbooks is disputed to this day, but the lesson landed anyway. After Tacoma, wind tunnel testing of bridge designs was eventually made mandatory. It took a bridge that killed no one to force a change that all the dead men before it couldn't. Which brings us back around to Vajont in 1963 and to the word I promised you. The mountain that came down had been watched for years. Geologists had warned that the slope was unstable. There were smaller landslides, there were danger signals. The company operating the dam and the Italian government concealed reports and dismissed the evidence and when they finally tried to lower the water level to reduce the risk, it was too late. After the wave, with 2,000 people dead, the official position from the operator and the state was that it had been a natural disaster, an act of God. Others pointed to the geologists' warnings and called it exactly what it was: preventable. Eventually, some employees were sentenced for negligence and manslaughter. Many people who lived through it thought the sentences were far too light. Decades later, the United Nations would list Vajont as a case of human and scientific error, not nature. And if you think the pattern stopped once we had computers and modern codes, look at July 17, 1981, Kansas City, Missouri. The Hyatt Regency Hotel, open barely a year, hosting a Friday tea dance with about 1,600 people in the atrium. 2 suspended walkways crossed that atrium, packed with guests watching the crowd below. During construction, a change was made to how those walkways hung from the ceiling, a change that doubled the load on a single connection. That connection was already too weak to meet code. So on the night it failed, it was carrying roughly 3 times what it could safely bear. Investigators later concluded the walkways would have collapsed under just 1/3 of the weight on them that night. There had even been a warning shot during construction when a large section of the atrium roof caved in. At about 7:05, the connections let go. The 4th floor walkway fell onto the 2nd floor walkway, and both crashed into the crowd. 114 people were killed. 216 were injured. The rescue took 14 hours. The engineers of record lost their licenses in 4 states and were found guilty of gross negligence in their profession, but they were acquitted of criminal charges, and a federal grand jury declined to indict them at all. Victims and families were awarded around $140 million. Added up: Quebec, Boston, St. Francis, Tacoma, Vajont, Kansas City. 7+ decades, 4 countries, steel and concrete and molasses and mountain rock. Different materials, different engineers, different centuries, same spine running through every single one. The warning existed before the disaster. The person who raised it was overruled or ignored, and when the counting was done, almost nobody stood in a courtroom for long. Mulholland walked. The Vajont sentences were called a joke by the people who buried their families. The Kansas City engineers never saw a criminal charge stick. What did change was the rule book, written every time in blood. Tacoma gave us mandatory wind tunnel testing. St. Francis gave California a dam safety agency the year after the flood. Vajont helped create the entire field of engineering geology. Kansas City forced the profession to rule that an engineer's stamp is a promise that cannot be handed off to anyone else. Every one of those reforms exists because the warning that should have stopped the disaster wasn't enough on its own. It took the bodies. So look back at that dam in Italy one more time. It's still there. It held. It did its job. 2/3 of the water stayed right where the engineers designed it to stay, and the valley below it is a graveyard. If the structure can survive and the people can't, then the failure was never really in the concrete. It was in the room where somebody read the warning out loud and decided it could wait. That room is still open. Somebody is sitting in it right now. And if you were going to build the next one exactly the way we built the last 6, would it not look precisely like this?